I think we're okay without it.
Okay.
He's got a big voice.
I try. All right. So thanks a lot for coming to this seminar tonight. And let me introduce myself first. Actually, my name is Raymond. Coming from the Institute for Entrepreneurship on PolyU. So probably a couple of people here may know me before. But I'm not the stage today is for those people. So today we are very happy to have Richard again to be with us. Richard has played a lot with the three speakers tonight, and under this Beyond Business as Usual, we have already organized 5.
Tonight's fun.
So this is the 5th time that we work together to organize seminars under this sort of banner. So under this banner, we try to really invite speakers, not only in town but also from sometimes from overseas, to speak about like the how to be more sustainable and more create more social impact while you can conduct the business. It's always follow our also spirit under Institute for Entrepreneurship. We always talk about do well and do good, spirit and philosophy. So how business can have a good business model while can include sustainability, environmental protection, all that kind of things, so that the not only the business can also sustain. So we are happy today to Richard, and you will introduce the speaker.
I'll torture you.
I let you run.
He usually runs out when he's done with us.
Okay. So I let Richard to introduce the guest speakers. So today's topic is mostly on system and sustainable business. Yes. So hopefully you will enjoy the show. And without further ado, I pass it to Richard to run the show.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming out. My name is Rich Brubaker, as Raymond was mentioning earlier. I'm actually based in Shanghai, but I've been the Beyond As Usual platform. I see a few old faces, people we've known and seen before. This is actually our 2nd event on systems that we will talk about tonight. We did one last week in Shanghai, and tomorrow I fly to Singapore to run this again. This is actually an Asia conversation, but we're trying to localize each of the content so that basically, at the end of the day, while we're having a similar conversation about a system, the application in each city is actually quite different. And I'll kind of allude to that a little bit earlier. The last events that we had actually involved talking about limits of growth, energy, water, food, and I'll incorporate a little bit of that tonight. But I'm really going to let these 3 guys talk about what they've been doing as entrepreneurs when it comes to systems. I'm going to talk about waste and risk, and they're really focused on how to turn a waste into something new. So basically, when I'm looking at the systems, particularly around sustainability, you have to come back to economics. And a really fundamental basis of economics is you put one person in a city, they create 4 times GDP than if they were not in the city, if they're in the rural area. And this becomes important because in Asia, we're talking about mega city development. We're talking about urbanization as the leading kind of growth driver for all the cities. Singapore is going to add another 20%. Hong Kong is going to add people. China's moving 300 million people into the city. And while this 4 times GDP is great, it also results in 4 to 6 times the amount of emissions, primarily because the systems that we have underlying our cities are actually very efficient. Now, I'm not going to stand here like Al Gore or an environmentalist and tell you that, that capitalism is evil, that, politicians don't know what they're doing. We're talking about very complex systems that require systemic thought. And that's kind of what tonight's a little bit about, what I will talk about from the systems level, and that they will kind of talk about from the other side of it. Smog is a byproduct of systems. It's a byproduct of energy. If you took the tube to get here, if you turned on lights, if you've texted, it all requires energy. The conversation that we're having right now is how much energy does it take to kind of create growth, to create GDP. And just a very basic number in China right now, and unfortunately I don't have the Hong Kong breakout versus the mainland, but in China overall it takes 3 times the amount of energy to produce 1 unit of GDP than it would in the States, Japan, or Europe. And that's a problem because you will end up with more smog as we move the next 300 million into a city, or the next 5 million into Hong Kong. And so this issue, this kind of movement of people in the cities to create GDP, then ends up having different effects. It's not just smog, it's also waste, which we'll talk about, e-waste, food waste, plastic waste. It's about water quality, it's about food quality, it's about where do we get all these resources? Because these resources really aren't free. If you've flown into Hong Kong lately, you start seeing that they're filling in the bay by taking out some of the islands a little bit beyond the horizon, right? All this stuff is coming from somewhere. The question is going to be, is it built on the right system? Are we using the right level of efficiency? And if not, how can we make some changes? Just some really quick pictures. I mean, this is the mainland China, again, Greater China, actually including Hong Kong. You look at when people move into the city, that 1 to 4, their need for food, for dairy, for all the things that go into the system, exponentially is growing right now. And so while you may be someone who's looked at, say, Al Gore and The Inconvenient Truth and the carbon, it's almost the exact same picture for many of the things that we rely upon every day. Now, this is true for energy as well. For mainland China to go forward, it needs about 400% more energy than what it has today by 2030. Now, locally in Hong Kong, what that means is, and if you've been following the news, CLP's basically said it's going to cost 5 to 10% more every year for energy for the next 10 years. So the next 6 to 10 years, energy prices are going to double for commercial, for residential, for what industrial is left. And that is basically their way to start bringing these curves down, to start creating efficiency. And if you look at water, another one. If you look at rural populations, what you will see is a large percentage of water is going to food, so this green bar. But if you look at urban areas like Hong Kong, Shanghai, Guangzhou, Singapore, it's all going to this blue bar. Shanghai's here. Hong Kong is actually kind of, the blue is this way. It's a little bit wider. And that's because of energy. About 50% of Hong Kong's water is not for anything but energy production. It just goes into keeping the lights on in the city, right? So every time you flip on your light, you're actually turning on your tap at the same time. And depending upon the city that you're in, you may actually spend more water turning on your lights while you brush your teeth than when you turn off the tap, right? So you're always hearing like, turn off the tap while you're brushing your teeth. You might want to turn off the light as well, if you're worried about water. And what this means going forward for a city like Hong Kong, which in 2017, their buying of the river water across the harbor changes, it means that water prices are going to go up. So these systems that we're talking about for a while have been very subsidized by cheap and easy access, politically, financially, and socially. But as the cities grow and as the systems, these inefficiencies grow in size, it's going to get more expensive when we start to actually self-correct. Now tonight we actually have 3 entrepreneurs who are talking about actually dealing with some of these byproducts, dealing with some of these waste products. And I believe that most of you are all dealing with the issue of landfills and waste overall. That's a big issue for Hong Kong right now, is where is this stuff going to, particularly as China won't take it. So what we're seeing is, if I'm talking to my corporate clients, or I'm even talking to, also with efficiency this week in home affairs, how do you move from a linear model where, if I'm talking to a manufacturer, they're looking at this box, They only care about what's inside their supply chain that they directly control. How can they mitigate the risk? How can they create efficiency? And maybe if you're talking to an Apple, they're looking at retail, maybe doing a lead project or finding ways to really squeeze out the inefficiencies in their own system. But when they're doing that, as companies, as governments, as individuals, we really tend to silo our efforts. So I'm a specialist in logistics, I'm a specialist in retail, and we don't talk to each other. And this is one of the big issues kind of going forward, is if you look at what's going on in Hong Kong and in other areas of the world right now, the governments are trying to really silo bust. They're trying to figure out how they can create conversations across these supply chains, across their various value chains, to grab the efficiencies that should be there. And interestingly enough, when I'm in North Asia, we're really focused on these issues because of the level of manufacturing. But when I fly to Singapore tomorrow, it's about materials and waste, because their exposure to the raw material sourcing in Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia, and other places. But then also in Singapore, where they're heavily focused on reducing waste, whether it's through incineration, recycling, or design, you're seeing a lot more regulations coming in on that end, something that Hong Kong has not done, something that China is struggling with. So these are some of the systems that we're really looking at. And what's end up happening now, if you look at H&M, if you look at Apple to some degree, if you look at Hayworth, which makes office furniture, or Interface, which we had here 6 months ago, they're really looking at how to close this loop. And this is where, hopefully, whether it's through tonight or through the future conversations, or by your own discussions in your office, you'll start to see that when you're busting silos, what will end up happening is this circulation effect comes in, where people who work with design are also talking to retailers to reduce, reuse, re-up, and basically redesign the way that their process is going. And this is where firms like Interface have become really interesting, and where I hope we'll hear a little bit about tonight. A lot of the firms right now, they comply with all the laws. Most of them. Okay, Foxconn may not at all times, Apple may not at all times, but their first starting point is that we comply with laws. We comply with demands of our customers. We give them what they want. But through that circular process, doing this, they're starting to turn their products into something that's a positive. So, Interface, this founder, they make carpet. And they've, over time, through design, through other products, through redesign of the manufacturing process, they've been able to remove about 85% of the waste in their entire value chain, including at the consumer end. When the consumer throws away carpet, it comes back into the manufacturing process as a new raw material that can be recycled 100%. And they've even gotten to the point now where they're now contributing. This is part of their new fishing net program. They take nylon fishing net out of the ocean and turn that into carpet. And we're seeing this more and more. Not just because there's regulation, not just because their consumers are saying, we want something green, we want something renewable, because they realize that there's efficiency in that system. The raw material costs are coming down, their process is improving, their competitive nature is much stronger. So with that, I kind of want to open up to the three entrepreneurs here, because what we're seeing is, if you look at the firms who are doing this the most, it's those who are entrepreneurial. They're understanding the byproducts of the system that's linear, and they're creating a circular economy around it. And so, if you look at what Ray Anderson was doing, he's an entrepreneur. It's his own firm, he built it himself, and he was able to make those changes. But he was working with other entrepreneurs to figure out how to change his system so that at the end, his risk was reduced and his competitive nature was much stronger. I'm gonna leave it at that for the academic content, because I know that's a lot to throw out there. And I want to really get into the narratives and the stories of what these three guys are doing here. I don't know, Hanley, do you want to go first?
Sure.
So I'm just going to introduce, it's Hanley Lee, and he's with a group called Carry Had. I actually found you about 2 weeks ago when you were interviewed for SCMP.
Yes.
So his project is, which he will introduce, was just highlighted quite publicly, and it's a very interesting story. So please come on up.
Hi everyone. I'm Henley, as Richard mentioned. Yeah, I'm doing something related to waste. But before I start, I just want to say I bet for all the audience, you are all older than me. I'm pretty young here. I would say, yeah. I'm actually just graduated from the Chinese University of Hong Kong, and yeah, before that I was messing around, but now I'm messing with plastic bags. So let's get started. So let me introduce about our company. So I'm from Korea. We are founded in July 2013, which is 5 months ago, and two founders. My partner, she's 20 and I'm 23. So that's why I said I'm pretty young here. So yeah. So because I'm young, so I can't give you a really detailed lecture or business model. Though I have a bachelor, I have a BBA in PolyU HK, but I can't give you a lecture. Maybe I can give you my experience, so maybe you can get something out of it. This is what I can do, I think. So I'll divide my presentation into 3 parts. First, past, when I was messing around. Now, what I'm doing, and what I want to do in the future. So in the past, I was born in 1989, and I've been messing around for 23 years. So yeah, how did I mess around? So actually, I was not the best student in class. Though in primary school, I was top in class, but when I get to secondary school, I was the worst. I was the last 20 students in my high school, and I was fighting, cheating in examination, all this kind of bad behavior. I did all this in my first 18 years. And yeah, just like this guy. And when I was from 18 years old to 22, I was still not a best student. Though I managed to get into a university, I attended just 10% of my class. So that's why I say I can't give you a lecture, because I wasn't listening. And I love traveling a lot. This experience helped us to found career.